Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another week of quick tips for your classroom. My name is Milton. I'm the senior teacher for adult courses in British Council, Mexico. What does a senior teacher mean? It means that I have responsibilities such as supporting other teachers by providing training, by providing coaching and ideas of how to improve their teaching and their relationship with their students. These videos, as you might have seen already, are videos to provide you teachers with some tips that you can quite quickly and practically implement to use in your classroom. We are doing this as part of a lead up to BBELT 2022. BBELT is the best and brightest of English language teaching, and it's the conference that we will be having in February. More information on that in a minute. So I just want to remind you that throughout this session, throughout this video, I will encourage you to write some questions in the box. And at the end of the presentation, I will try to respond to many of those questions as possible. So if you have a question, if you have a comment, please write it down and I'll come back to it at the end. Okay? So without further ado, let's begin. Can we start with the first slide? So today, the topic of today's session is how to help your learners see progress. And as part of this, how to help us as teachers see progress as well, because with one comes the other, of course. Hopefully this will help support you throughout a course and also within an actual lesson. But before I talk about that, I'd like to talk a little bit about something different. Can we go to the next slide? As you know, or as I think I've told you, I'm from England. I'm from London. And I thought it would be nice, because of the time of year and how close we are to Christmas, to share a little bit with you some typical British Christmas traditions that maybe you haven't heard of. Maybe you have, and maybe you haven't. So here you can see we have three pictures. The picture on the left is what we call mulled wine. Mulled wine is very typical in England and the whole of the UK, actually, during Christmas. It is a warm wine. Not just warm, actually, it's hot. And it's prepared with orange, some orange juice, some star anise, some cinnamon, and some brown sugar. And it's mixed together and it's warmed up and it's drunk during the Christmas period. Why? I don't know, but it's delicious. And probably one of the reasons why is that in England, in the UK, excuse me, during the Christmas period of year, it's very cold. So we want something warm to warm us up. Another interesting tradition that I'm not sure you would have heard about is the Christmas cracker. This is the photo in the middle. As you can see, the object that the two hands are calling is the Christmas cracker. Now, this is normally placed on the table during the Christmas meal. At some point, normally at the beginning of the meal, you pick it up and you pick someone to break it with. You pull on both ends, and with a bang, it explodes open. Not a big bang, of course. And inside, you find a little toy or a little object. So, for example, it might be a small compass. It might be a nail clipper. It might be a sewing thumb. So it could be anything, really. Also, you'll find a very bad Christmas joke. The jokes are so terrible, and they're for you to share with everyone on the table. And a Christmas paper hat, which in the UK you put on your head and you leave it on your head for the entire Christmas dinner. Bit strange, isn't it? But it's a tradition. And finally, on the right, you can see a traditional British Christmas pudding. Now, this is made with dried fruits, so things like raisins and dried apricots. It's also made with nuts. And one of the interesting things about this is that it's traditionally made on January the 1st, the previous year. So for a whole year, it ferments in your cupboard or wherever you decide to leave it. And then before Christmas, you take it out, you warm it up, you put some brandy on top, and you set it alight. And it's an interesting experience. Everyone turns the lights off and it's part of the Christmas experience. It's very nice. And it's delicious. You normally eat it with brandy butter. So butter mixed with brandy and some sugar. Oh, it's so delicious. I'm going to miss it this year because I'm here in Mexico. One final thing I want to mention about Christmas, which is different to Mexico, is that we have our Christmas dinner on the 25th. Here in Mexico, you have it on the 24th, but we have it on the 25th, typically as a lunch, as a late lunch. On the 24th, normally people spend some time with their friends. But there you go. That's enough about Christmas. Let's begin. Carlos, can you go to the next slide, please? So the objectives of today, hopefully we can answer these 3 questions. So the first question is, why is it important learners see progress? Why should we be focused on this as teachers? Why should we care, basically? It may seem obvious, but perhaps there are more reasons to just the obvious. And then we're going to respond to how can we support this in a class and how we can support this over a course. So how can we support learners see learning in a class and progress over a course, so short term and long term. Hopefully with some of these tips, you'll be better able to do that. And finally, there'll be a small prize. If you've been watching the previous videos, you'll probably remember the prize, but it's a very, very good prize. So if you stay to the end, you'll be pleasantly surprised, I'm sure. So to the next slide, let's begin. Now, why is it important that learners see progress? Well, I'd like to use the metaphor of running a marathon. I haven't actually ran a full marathon myself. I run a half marathon, but I would like you to imagine you're running a marathon. You know, it's how many miles is it? It's something like 24 miles or something like that, and kilometers, I don't know, 40 something. It's very, very, very long. And, you know, as an amateur, it probably takes you around 4 hours or something like that, or more even. I want you to imagine that you're running this and you start to get tired. You start to get really tired, exhausted. And then you have a think, how far have I run? I don't know. How far do I have left? No idea. How fast have I been going? Who knows? How do you think somebody feels in that moment? They probably feel quite demotivated and unsatisfied. And what would be the result of feeling very demotivated, unsatisfied? If you're feeling exhausted and you have no idea how far you have left, you might give up. You might stop running. So with that metaphor in mind, can we go to the next slide, please? Carlos, the next slide. Thank you. So why is it important for learners to see their progress? Well, it's motivating. When you see how far you have run, or when you see how much you have learnt, you feel proud, you feel satisfied, you feel motivated to continue because you can see that it's working. You can see that you're succeeding. You can see that you're making progress. It promotes learner autonomy. When learners are more aware of how they're progressing and what are their strengths and what are their areas to improve, they're more likely to take control of their learning. They're more likely to think, look, okay, my grammar is really good, but my speaking is not really progressing at the rate I want it to. If students are able to identify that themselves, they'll be more targeted in their studies. It's also important for learners to see an end to their studies. I know as English teachers, we all know you never stop learning English. But that doesn't mean that you can never stop taking classes and you can never stop studying, because, you know, it's important for people's lives. And some people will be happy to study forever, but some people have very concrete objectives. For example, they want to move abroad. They want to study a master's. They want to be able to talk with friends. They want to be able to travel. And it helps learners see where that end is. It helps them see how far I've got left. And it also prepares learners for the B2 plateau, excuse me. What is this? B2 is around a kind of high intermediate level. It's, as many teachers will know, students often get to a B2 level and then it's very difficult for them to improve. Why is it difficult for them to improve? Well, because at B2 level, you can more or less manage any situation. You can more or less survive in any situation. So you can just fall back on what you already know. You can just rely on that. And you don't really have the intrinsic need to learn more. If we support learners in the way that they can visualize their progress and the way that they can prepare themselves to progress, this will help them at that stage. It helps provide with some scaffolding and some structure for them to continue progressing up into C1, C2, and in whatever kind of objective they may have. So it's very important. And obviously, if you're a language school, all of these reasons will help learners realize that they want to continue with this school. So there's kind of economic reasons to it as well, financial reasons. So let's look at some of the tips. First, we're going to begin with tips in the classroom. Next slide, please. In the classroom, class menus. What is a class menu? This is when the teacher writes the objectives on the board for students to see before the class. So an example of an objective might be to talk about experiences using the present perfect. This will be the overall objective. They can also be some other objectives to practice reading. Maybe you'll do a reading before you do the grammar. To practice speaking, maybe you do a speaking activity as the final practice. By having these objectives on the board, learners know what they will be studying, and that's important. It's important to know what you're doing to see progress. Class menus are interesting. They can be negotiated. So let's take a YL, a young learner example. If you have some of the objectives, you have something like play a game with verbs. You have an objective like listen to a podcast. You have an objective of draw something. Students, young learners, if you provide them with the option of choosing which activity they want to do first, which activity they're most excited about, that's very motivating, and it's going to get them engaged in the lesson. It's going to help them see that they have a say in their own learning. Now, of course, I gave an example for young learners, but this can also be done with adults. You can also say, is one of these activities not useful for you? Is there something you would rather not do? Or is there something extra you think we should do? By allowing students to participate in the plan for a class, it helps them take control over their learning, and it's motivating. Now, the idea is with class menus that once you start the class, you refer to them throughout the lesson. So, for example, when, as I said, I gave the example of how to talk about experiences by using the present perfect. If you do a reading first, you can tick off the reading bit. Then you look at the grammar. You can tick off the grammar bit. Why? I mean, this seems very obvious, but why is this useful? Because it helps learners see that, oh, we've done this, now I feel good about this, now I feel good about that. They can see the progression in the lesson. And it also helps them to see what is next and helps prepare them for what is next. So class menus, if you don't do it already, I highly recommend it. Next slide, please. Signposting. So signposting, what is it? Well, a signpost, as you know, tells you how to get somewhere or tells you where you're going. We all need a sign when we're learning. We all need a sign of how well we're doing. What our responsibility is as teachers is to help learners see that sign. So what does this mean? This means throughout a class saying what activity we're doing and why. Okay? The purpose of an activity is extremely important that students understand that. So, for example, with the topic of talking about experiences, I would say something like, now we're going to read a text which talks about which has a person who's talking about their experiences. As we are going to look at how to talk about experiences ourselves, this is an example from a proficient speaker. So they know why they're reading it, because they know it's going to relate to the grammar. And this is very, very useful for learners to know where they're going. And then after you finish the reading, you might want to say something like, now we've finished the reading, what are we going to do next? Now some learners might, because you have the class menu at the beginning of the class, they might say, now we're going to look at grammar. You can say correct. And learners are involved in that. So those two examples I gave are what we call prospective signposting and retrospective signposting. Okay? Prospective signposting is asking students, what do you think we're doing next? Or you telling them, next we're going to go do this. Retrospective signposting is, what did we just do? Why did we just do it? How did you feel about it? Was it useful? So these are two strategies of involving learners in the process of the class. And of course, you can also have negotiated signposting. So you might say, well, now we finished the reading text. What we could do now is we could do a small speaking activity to discuss it, or we can go straight to the grammar. And students might say, well, let's do a bit of speaking because I thought this was an interesting topic. Or they might say, no, let's get to the grammar. I'm interested in starting the grammar. Giving learners that power that empowerment to decide what's happening next in the class and to have a bit of a say in their own development is very, very motivating and aids them to visualize their progress. So signposting, there we go. Next slide, please. Reflection. Now, I'm sure to some extent, most of you all include some form of reflection in your class. I can't emphasize how important this is. Looking back at what you've learned, thinking about what have I learned? Was it useful? How much did I learn? How will I continue to practice this? Is vital in learning, is vital in language learning. So a typical example of this would be at the end of the lesson for 5 to 10 minutes, the teacher might put some discussion questions on the board, and learners may have to either write their answers or discuss in groups. Some typical questions might be, what did you learn this lesson? Or maybe you can focus it a bit more. Name 3 things that were new for you this lesson. Or maybe you can provide them the opportunity to provide you as the teacher some feedback. Name 2 things you liked and 1 thing you didn't like about the lesson. Now we've got thick skin teachers, so we can take that feedback, and it's good for us to understand that. And that comes to my second point. When you listen to what students say about how they perceive the lesson, that is absolutely vital information for the teacher. It helps the teacher going forward in preparation for subsequent classes. It helps him or her decide, this works well with this class, this doesn't work so well. Students understood when I used this approach, they found this approach very difficult. They like a lot of speaking practice, or they like me to give them extra time to reflect on grammar. So the information you gain from that is very important. Now we're going to look at over a course. Next slide, please, Carlos. Now, with adult learners, I always begin a new course with SMART objectives. For me, this is extremely useful. This serves as a form of a needs analysis. It helps me understand who the student is and why they're learning and what they want to improve in. But it's also very useful for the learners. Why are they good? Well, first of all, what is a SMART objective? An example of a SMART objective might be, by the end of this course, I want to be more confident in talking with a client over the phone about a new product. So that's quite a specific aim. It's measurable. How do you measure it? Well, when they speak to the client, can they survive in that conversation? Achievable? Well, that is an achievable aim for someone at B1, B2, or something like that. Maybe A0 is not achievable. So maybe at A0, they shouldn't be using that. Is it realistic? Yes, of course. Why not? And timely? At the end of the course, there's a clear time frame. It's great because learners can create them. It provides them with a bit of autonomy in their own progression, what they want to learn. And it tells you as a teacher what they'd like you to cover in the course. It also helps manage expectations. Sometimes learners think, especially adult learners, they think, in 2 months, I'm going to be able to write a perfect email. Well, it's not as simple as that, as we all know. So it helps as you negotiate those objectives with the students, it helps manage those expectations. It keeps learners goal orientated. What does that mean? It helps you avoid going off on tangents about different topics. If the student out of the blue, they say, oh, I want to learn about, body vocabulary. Well, maybe that's relevant in the class. but maybe it isn't. Maybe you think, we can spend some time on this, but remember, we're focusing the class time on achieving our objectives. And finally, it promotes learner autonomy. Once learners are able to create smart aims and analyze and identify whether they achieve them or not, they will continue to do so because it's very motivating. And once learners can start creating their own smart objectives outside of the class, in terms of learning, that's real autonomy, that's real independence, and that's what we should be striving for. Next slide, please. Continuous assessment. So many language courses do a very big exam at the end of the course. How much did you learn? This is what we call a summative test. This is how much have you learned over the course. Finished. I would like to encourage people to think about continuous assessment to include some formative as well as summative testing. What does formative testing mean? It means providing some sort of test or exam to help you as the teacher and the student decide what to continue studying, what to continue focusing on in subsequent classes. So the strengths that a student demonstrates in a formative test helps you decide that, well, we don't need to do more of this, but the areas to improvement that are highlighted in that formative test helps you say, well, we need to do more of this. So it's a tool which we use throughout a course to measure kind of milestones being reached, and also to help reorganize or edit or adapt what is coming up in the course. Now, this can be formal, so it can be like, here we have a progress test of Unit 1. Everyone quiet, individual, etc. Or it can be something a bit more informal. It can be like a speaking activity where students are encouraged to use the language that have been seen so far, and you can provide students with some feedback in an informal way. You can decide whatever is better for the class. And it helps, as the point I was making earlier, it encourages learning that is being guided by testing. So once we see what students are strong in or weak in, we can then adapt the course based on that. And it provides a much clearer picture of a student's level. I don't know if you're anything like me, but I get very nervous with tests, with exams. And I think I always felt at school that sometimes they didn't reflect my strengths. Sometimes I did worse than I thought I should have done. When you're doing continuous assessment, lots of small tests, you're much likely to see exactly what are the students' strengths and weaknesses. It's not an all or nothing test. Students have many opportunities to demonstrate what they're doing well in. Next slide, please. Oh, that's the final slide. Okay, so thank you very much. I hope these suggestions were useful for you. I hope perhaps you may have seen this. You already may be using some of these activities in class. If so, well, fantastic, good for you. And perhaps you may have seen these in training courses and you haven't quite yet implemented it. My suggestion is to you, once you go back to school in 2022, try them. Fresh start from there. So, questions and answers. Do you have any questions or comments about what we've discussed today? Please write them in the chat and I will try to respond to them as best as I can. We're just going to wait a little bit to see if we get any questions. Remember, just to kind of summarize what we've looked at today, we've looked at why supporting learners see their progress as important. Why do we need to do that? We've also looked at how to do this within a class. Some of the activities include a class menu, include signposting, and we've also looked at over a course. We've looked at setting smart aims and continuous assessment. Do you have any questions about any of those tips? Or do you have any other tips that you'd like to share with the world? Or do you have any comments? Do you have any concerns? Anything you're not sure about? So I'm still waiting for some comments. I'll give it another minute. Maybe I was very, very clear. Fernanda has a question. Could you explain the difference between formative and summative assessment with an example for each, please? Okay, Fernanda. So formative assessment, the idea for formative assessment is to provide a progress test of what's been learnt so far to help the teacher and the students see what should be done next. So an example formative assessment, for example, I've covered a unit in a course book, and in the unit, we've looked at present perfect to discuss experiences. We've looked at listening to a podcast and things like that. An example of a formative assessment would be doing one of the activities. So tell your partner about 3 experiences you've had while traveling. And you discuss that with your partner. And as you listen to that, you as the teacher, you can see, well, they're using the present perfect correctly overall, but they're still making some mistakes with has and have in third person or in whatever, I need to review that. So it's a small test to help decide what's happening next. A summative test is a test at the end of a course. So a final grammar and vocabulary test, a final speaking test, and there is no focus on what to study next in the subsequent lessons. So that's basically what the difference is. A summative test is the typical end of course test where you look at everything and it's like a pass or a fail. Whereas a formative test, there's no passing or failing. The formative is, what do I need to continue improving on? I hope that answered your question, Fernanda. If not, please write another comment. Carlos wrote, are platforms like Kahoot good for testing students' advance? Yes, definitely. Why not? I like Kahoot for kind of progress tests. So maybe you look at 2 or 3 language items in 2 weeks, and in 2 weeks you can do a Kahoot which focuses on all of that, and you can see how many points students get. Or you can use a Kahoot at the end of a class or at the practice stage of a class, looking at the language you focused on in the class. I think it's a very good tool to see progress within a class and then also progress over some time. The only thing I'd say though, Carlos, is that it's Kahoot is what we call kind of discrete item testing. What does that mean? That means can students identify the correct answers in the options? Now, this is useful, of course, but what is much more useful, Carlos, is if they are able to use the language when they're speaking or when they're writing. No? So that is much, much more useful. So Kahoot is useful for quick testing, but what you really want to see is, can they use it? Can they produce it? That's much more useful. Yes, Lucia, formative assessment is helpful to planning following classes. Exactly, Lucia. That's precisely the reason we use it. It helps us plan the future classes, and it also helps students understand why you're reviewing something from the past, or it helps students understand why you're making certain planning decisions. So if you decide, we need to look at present perfect again, well, you can say, what? And the students might say, why are we looking at it again? Well, we did this activity and we weren't using it correctly. So we need to have a little bit more of a review. It helps you plan the following classes, and it also helps you justify why you're doing that. So yeah, good questions, guys. Thank you very much. Are there any more? Lucia and Carlos, I hope those answered your questions. Okay, well, thank you very much for your questions. If you're watching this later, please write a question. I'll try to respond to it at a later stage. But thank you very much. So that is the end of the quick tips. But don't go yet, please. We have a little bit of information about B-Belt. So B-Belt, as I said at the beginning, is best and brightest in English language teaching. And this will be held next year in February. It's a national conference in Mexico. It's the date in the calendar of English language teaching in Mexico. It's a truly big event, and we have specialists and experts from all over the world who come and discuss. They come and present presentations, workshops, posters, all sorts of things, and it's a very special event. I go every year. I've been for the last 6 years, and I've learned so much. I've met so many people. I've networked so well, and I highly recommend it. Now, as part of this video, because you stayed to the end, we're going to talk about a little present for you. So the next slide, please, Carlos. So as you watched this video tip, we have a small present for you, a small gift. When you buy a ticket for BBelt 22, you will automatically receive a second completely free to invite whoever you like. This will be a fantastic Christmas gift for your fellow teachers. You can do this you can validate this promotion by going onto the BBelt website. And once you've bought a ticket, you can register the second person on this link. You can use the code which we're sharing here, so quick tips 131221, and as soon as you pay, you'll receive an email with the second code, the code to register your friends, completely free. Okay, so it's basically a buy one get one free. It's a great deal. Fernanda asks, is it going to be in Mexico City? And as we've responded, it's going to be online. Unfortunately, we still have to be very careful with the pandemic. Right? So yes, it will be online, let me tell you, Fernanda, one of the benefits of this is that you can see all of the conferences, or all the ones that you want to. It's great when it's face-to-face, because you get to meet people face-to-face. But the good thing about it being online is that you can watch all of the different sessions that you want to. You don't miss one because it's happening at the same time as another one, or you don't miss one because you can't go at 8 o'clock in the morning. So it's a different dynamic, but it's great. We have a short video for you to see about BBelt. Carlos, could you play it, please? So there you go, a short video about what BBelt is. As you can see from those videos, it's a very important, it's a very engaging experience. So the final slide, please, Carlos. So thank you very, very much for watching. This is going to be the last quick tips video this year in 2021. We will be back on January the 10th, and we'll be looking at a new topic, how to teach vocabulary. But for the meantime, I hope you have an excellent holiday. I hope you have some time. One of the good things about being a teacher is that we get some holidays. Hopefully all of you get some holidays. I hope you rest. I hope you relax. I hope you have some great food. And I hope you spend time with your family. And I hope you keep safe, because we've got to be very careful. But that's it for this year. Thank you very much. And we're going to end on a final video about BBelt 2022. Hopefully you're all interested and you want to come. So if you do, I hope to see you there online, virtually. But thank you very much. Happy holidays, everyone. Goodbye.